Hi, we've got here with us today Associate Professor Cameron Parsell from the School of Social Science. He is a future fellow in social science and his research is in the field of poverty and the welfare state. Welcome, Cameron.
G'day, Kim. How's it going?
Good. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
No worries.
We're going to talk a little bit about the kind of funding people can get outside the ARC. I think there's a lot of emphasis on ARC funding, but you've been incredibly successful getting research funding from other sources. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Do you want to start by telling us maybe the last 3 funding bodies that you've received grants from for research?
Yeah, sure. There's been a few recently. We've had a number of grants from the Queensland government and also some from the Commonwealth government, but also we've received a grant from St Vincent de Paul Society, so from a large charity. We've also received in the last month a grant from Launch Housing, which is a housing provider in Melbourne. So we receive grants from both community organisations, large and small grants too, as well as large, in addition to the state and the Commonwealth governments and state governments across Australia, not only here in Queensland.
That's really impressive. How do you find out about these funding opportunities?
Lots of ways. Often it's not a question of passively finding out, but assertively and actively seeking them out. So trying to sometimes pitch the grant to those providers themselves. So we do receive grants from government or community organisations when they list a grant and we apply. But very often, maybe even half the time, we actually approach organisations or departments themselves and ask them for money to pursue research, which is a little bit audacious and often unsuccessful, but nevertheless, sometimes more and more, it can work.
So do you think that you need to be audacious to be seeking this other kind of funding?
Oh, absolutely. I think you always have to be putting yourself out there and demonstrating your worth and how you can contribute to a social mission through the funding. So I think you absolutely need to be audacious and you need to be willing to have lots of people say no and for lots of people to just ignore you, for lots of people to laugh at you, for lots of people to want you to do the research without the money. But nevertheless, you have to constantly be out there and trying. And certainly of all the grants I've got, there are many, 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 many more unsuccessful attempts, either through a formal grant or through calling someone up or having a meeting and asking.
So how do you make yourself more competitive? Do you, once you've had a few of these grants, does it make you more competitive?
Yeah, sadly, as social scientists or humanities scholars, we understand that privilege often breeds privilege. So it is the case that having grants makes it easy to get another grant. And I think what we have to do is always think about getting a grant, very rarely ever individually, but always as a team. So whether we're someone just finishing a PhD or whether we're a senior professor or anywhere in between, we should always, or nearly always, be thinking about how can we get a grant as a part of a collective, and a collective of senior scholars, junior scholars, but also as a part of a collective of people from industry. So it's hard, but it's certainly less hard, but still hard when we think about getting a grant as a larger group. So I know a lot of people who don't have success in getting grants and often they're trying to do it by themselves, and that's, it's close to impossible. So we always want to think about how we can be partnering with others. And when we're senior, that is bringing other people up with us. And certainly when we're junior and mid, how can we work together with a mix of senior and junior people to get that funding?
That's excellent advice. So far we've learned that we need to be audacious and collaborative, which are 2 fantastic things to be. But I wonder if you actually have a philosophy of around research funding.
Excuse me, I probably have one philosophy and it encapsulates everything, and that is I see receiving funding from government, community organisations, or wherever it is, as a great privilege. And I see I have an overarching priority to ensure that any money that I receive is actually useful to the world, is useful beyond me and beyond the University of Queensland. Although they're important, everything I do about research is trying to spend the money, the research money, someone else's money, often taxpayers' money, to actually contribute that's something useful outside of the university. So my philosophy is this grant has to be of value to people other than privileged people at universities. Now, of course, that can also be a benefit to the research, but that's never my first priority. It's never what's driving me. It's always, how can this grant be useful? And I think that philosophy is important, but it's also the passion. We need to convey a passion to funders that we're actually really invested in the outcome or the vision of this research. And we need to convey that to people. And I think conveying that to people is a big part of the success and the hope of receiving that grant funding, that we really believe that this is going to be valuable.
Well, thanks so much, Cameron. That's a lovely note to end on. So I might end the recording there. Thank you very much for your time.
No worries, Kim. Nice to chat. See you later.